What if the people who speak the smoothest are the ones hiding the most? What if deception doesn't look like lies but sounds like charm and feels like confusion? And what if learning to see these signs clearly could protect not just your peace but your sense of self? Sign 1. They quickly change the subject when things get real. Some people lie not with what they say but with what they avoid saying. One of the most overlooked signs of deception is the speed and ease with which someone changes the subject. It doesn't scream dishonesty. It slides by under the radar. But when you're paying attention, it speaks volumes. You might be in the middle of a serious conversation. Maybe you bring up something important, like a boundary, a concern, or a feeling that's been weighing on you. And instead of responding, they pivot. Suddenly they're asking about dinner plans or bringing up a completely unrelated topic. It feels casual, almost innocent, but it's not. It's intentional. It's a form of evasion. Liars don't always lie by adding false information. Sometimes they lie by subtracting the truth. And one of the easiest ways to subtract truth is to avoid it altogether. They don't deny. They don't defend. They simply redirect. And the conversation moves on without ever touching what really mattered. It's easy to overlook this pattern. You don't want to seem confrontational. You tell yourself they were just distracted. You give them the benefit of the doubt. But when it happens again and again, especially when the topic is serious or vulnerable, it becomes clear they are not avoiding the conversation for your comfort. They're avoiding it for their own protection. The Stoics taught that we should confront what is true and uncomfortable, not just what is easy and pleasant. Avoidance is not peace. It's a delay of clarity. When someone consistently changes the subject away from real issues, what they're really saying is that truth threatens their image, their story, or their control. Think back to someone in your life who always diverted when things got real. How did you feel afterward? Unseen? Unheard? Maybe even foolish for bringing it up in the first place? That's the silent damage these small deflections cause. They train you to stop speaking your truth. They teach you to adapt to dishonesty. But here's the deeper insight. A person who cannot stay in a conversation that touches something real is not emotionally safe. They may be charming. They may be quick-witted. But when truth arrives, they vanish behind a smokescreen of casual talk or humor. And that's not coincidence. It's habit. Sometimes, they'll even make the shift seem like they're helping you. They might say, "Let's not dwell on the past," or "Come on, let's talk about something more fun." It sounds kind on the surface, but underneath, it's a rejection of truth, of your experience, of the moment that required courage to speak. And the more you let them change the subject, the more you teach them that deflection works. That discomfort will always be rewarded with a smooth exit. Over time, the space for real conversation closes, and the relationship becomes a performance rather than a connection. So, what can you do? Don't chase their new topic. Stay with your truth. Let the silence hang for a moment. Bring the conversation back. Not aggressively, but firmly, with calm presence. You deserve to be heard, not redirected. Because someone who truly values honesty will sit with discomfort. They will lean into what is real, even if it's hard. They won't run from the moment just because it challenges them. So the next time someone changes the subject right when things get vulnerable or honest pause, ask yourself, what are they afraid of? What part of the truth are they trying to leave untouched? Because sometimes silence isn't peace, it's a shield, and a quick subject change is not a quirk, it's a warning. Sign 2. They listen to respond, not to understand. There is a kind of listening that is not really listening at all. It looks polite from the outside, eye contact, nods at the right moments, even the occasional "I get it." But beneath the surface, something is missing. You can feel it in the way they rush to speak, in the way they seem more ready with a reply than they are willing to truly hear your words. This is not presence, this is performance. People who lie often don't know how to listen, not because they're incapable, but because listening requires openness. And openness is a threat when you're protecting a false version of yourself. True listening demands vulnerability. You have to let the truth land. You have to sit in someone else's experience without reshaping it to fit your own comfort. Liars don't want that. They want control. And control means steering the conversation, not holding space for it. When someone listens only to respond, they treat the conversation like a debate. Every sentence you say becomes a cue for their next move. They don't absorb your meaning. They scan your words for weakness, for a way to twist it, redirect it, or bury it. And so, even when you're pouring out something personal, it feels like you're being cross-examined instead of understood. The Stoics taught us that understanding begins where ego ends. To listen well, you must silence the inner urge to be right, to look good, to win. You must let go of the impulse to fix, to defend, to impress. You must simply receive what's being offered. Not just the words, but the emotion beneath them. Not just the facts, but the humanity in them. A liar doesn't operate that way. They are always managing perception, always shaping the narrative. And so their ears are open, but their mind is already crafting a response. Their face may look calm, but inside they're rehearsing, planning, preparing. Have you ever spoken to someone and felt like they weren't really with you? Like they were waiting for your turn to end so theirs could begin? That is the experience of being heard but not held. It creates disconnection. It makes you feel like your words are being tolerated, not valued. And over time, this kind of non-listening wears you down. You stop sharing as deeply. You edit yourself. You learn that the person across from you isn't really present. They're just performing empathy long enough to protect their position. And eventually, the trust that was once natural becomes strained or disappears altogether. But here's the thing. Real connection doesn't require perfect responses. It requires presence, a quiet mind, a heart that is willing to sit still with someone else's pain, confusion, joy, or truth without needing to reshape it. And that kind of listening is rare, especially in those who have something to hide. So, next time you speak with someone, pay attention to how they hold your words. Do they reflect your meaning back to you? Do they ask thoughtful questions that show they've understood? Or do they jump in too fast, cut you off, or shift the tone too quickly? That difference is subtle, but profound. Listening is not just a passive act. It is one of the most powerful forms of respect. And the way someone listens to you says more about their integrity than anything they might claim with words. Someone who values truth will listen slowly, thoughtfully, not to reply, but to understand. Sign 3. They get defensive even when there's no reason to. There's a kind of reaction that reveals more than words ever could. You ask a simple question, neutral in tone, and suddenly their shoulders tighten, their tone sharpens, their face closes like a door. You weren't accusing, you weren't judging, but they act as if you were. That's not sensitivity. That's a sign. When someone gets defensive over something that doesn't call for it, you're not just seeing emotion, you're seeing exposure. Their reaction isn't to your words. It's to what your words threaten to uncover. The Stoics taught that a person at peace with themselves doesn't rattle easily. They can hear criticism without collapsing. They can face discomfort without flinching. But someone who's hiding something especially elite doesn't have that stillness. They live with tension beneath the surface, and the moment you get too close to the truth, even unintentionally, they react. Fast, strong, out of proportion. It could be as small as asking, "Hey, did you say you were going to that meeting?" Or, "Just curious, who were you with earlier?" If their response jumps to defense, "Why are you checking up on me?" Or, "Wow, you really don't trust me," you need to pause, because calm people don't need to prove themselves so quickly. But liars often do. Not because they're being attacked, but because the truth feels like a threat even when it hasn't been spoken yet. Defensiveness without cause is often a form of preemptive control. It's designed to stop the conversation before it gets close to something uncomfortable. If they can make you feel like you were wrong to ask, like you crossed a line, then you're less likely to ask again. You're less likely to look deeper, and they stay protected. But in reality, you didn't cross a line. They did. You just got close enough to it for their fear to wake up. The deeper insight is this: someone who reacts with aggression or indignation to a gentle question isn't defending themselves from you. They're reacting to the possibility that their version of the story is at risk. Their image, their control. And when that happens, defensiveness becomes their armor loud enough to distract you from what you were about to discover. It's subtle, but powerful. Over time, you begin to avoid asking things altogether. You tiptoe around certain topics. You rehearse your questions in your mind to avoid triggering them. And just like that, the space for truth disappears. A relationship that can't hold questions is a relationship that cannot hold trust, because trust isn't just about believing someone. It's about feeling free to ask, to wonder, to clarify without being punished for it. So when someone gets defensive too quickly, ask yourself, what are they trying to protect? Why did that simple question land like an attack? And most importantly, why am I starting to feel like I did something wrong for simply being curious? The Stoics remind us that clarity is not cruelty. Asking for understanding is not a violation. You are allowed to seek the truth gently. And anyone who can't hold that is already holding something they don't want you to see. Sign 4. Their story sounds too perfect. There's a kind of honesty that feels raw, unfiltered, maybe even a little messy. It doesn't always arrive in perfect order. There are pauses, moments of uncertainty, even gaps. Because real memories aren't always clear-cut. Real experiences are lived, not scripted. But when someone tells you a story that's too clean, too polished, too airtight, something in you pauses. The details are all there. In fact, there may be too many. Specific times, exact phrases, perfect logic, strung together like a rehearsed speech. There's no hesitation, no, "I think it was around," or "I'm not sure exactly." It flows a little too smoothly, like something they practiced in front of a mirror. This is not what truth usually looks like. Truth meanders. It breathes. It remembers some parts clearly and others not at all. But lies often come dressed in certainty. The liar has rehearsed. They've edited. They've prepared for questions. And what they give you is not a memory. It's a performance. The Stoics valued truth not because it was elegant, but because it was real. A person of integrity doesn't try to make every detail perfect. They let it be what it is: flawed, incomplete, human. But someone who's hiding something wants control. And control shows up in over-preparation. Have you ever heard someone explain where they were, what they were doing, and who they were with in such precise detail that it almost felt like a script? That's not always a sign of clarity. Sometimes it's a sign of defense. They don't want to be questioned. They want to close the case before it's opened. And the best way to do that is to give you a story so perfect it feels impolite to challenge it. But underneath that smoothness, there's tension. You feel it in the speed of their delivery, in how quickly they rush to the end of the story, in how little space they leave for you to ask follow-ups. It's as if the story isn't being shared, it's being deployed. And here's the thing, someone telling the truth doesn't fear a clarifying question. They don't mind if they need to go back and explain something. They don't panic if they get a date wrong or have to admit they forgot a part. But a liar can't afford that vulnerability, because they're not recalling, they're constructing. And every detail is a brick in a wall they hope you won't look behind. Sometimes, they even use unnecessary information. They might include a vivid description of a location, the exact color of someone's shirt, or the weather details that sound impressive but serve no purpose. That's not storytelling, that's camouflage. So how do you spot it? Listen for overcommitment to the story. Look for patterns that seem rehearsed. Ask a question that wasn't anticipated, and watch what happens. Truth adapts, lies stumble. The most honest people are not the ones who always sound confident. They're the ones who are okay being unsure, who say, "I don't remember," or "Let me think for a second," who pause, not because they're hiding, but because they're digging through a real memory, not reciting one they built to protect themselves. So, next time someone's story feels too smooth, too airtight, ask yourself this: are they telling me the truth or selling me a version they need me to believe? Because sometimes the slickest story is the one furthest from reality. Sign 5. Their body turns away even when their words don't. The body often speaks before the mouth does, and sometimes it tells the truth that words are trying to cover. One of the most subtle yet powerful signs of dishonesty is when a person's body is pointed away from you while they speak. Their words may sound open, their tone may seem relaxed, but their posture, their feet, their shoulders, their entire orientation is saying something else. It's easy to overlook this, especially when the person is talking confidently. They may even smile or make eye contact, but watch their stance. Are they leaning back when the conversation gets serious? Are their feet angled toward the door? Are their arms crossed, even as they say everything's fine? These signals are not random. They're unconscious attempts to create distance. The Stoics taught that when your inner world is calm, your external world follows. There is no need to guard, no need to pull back. If someone is being honest, their body naturally leans in, their hands are relaxed, their presence is aligned. But when there is tension inside, when there is something unspoken, the body often takes a defensive posture even when the mouth says otherwise. You might notice that when you ask a difficult question, they physically shift away. They may reposition their chair, turn their head slightly, avert their gaze for just a moment. It's not dramatic, it's subtle, but it's telling, because the body does not know how to lie as well as the mind does. And while someone may craft a convincing explanation, their nervous system will often betray them. If the truth creates no threat, there is no reason to withdraw. But holding that truth feels risky. The instinct to pull back shows up without them even realizing it. Think back to a time when someone told you something important, yet you couldn't shake the feeling they were withholding something. Maybe they were saying all the right words, but their energy was distant. They weren't grounded in the conversation. Their presence felt partial, disconnected, and you walked away feeling uncertain, not because of what they said, but because of how they said it. This is what happens when body language and spoken language are not in agreement. The mind is crafting a message, but the body is quietly revealing resistance, hesitation, or even guilt. The most honest conversations are not just about words. They're about alignment, the voice, the eyes, the posture, the breath, all moving in the same direction. But when someone turns away even slightly, even unconsciously, they are pulling away from connection. They are signaling, "I am not fully here with you." And if this happens often in moments that matter, it's not something to ignore. Over time, you begin to feel it. You stop leaning in. You sense that something about their presence is guarded, and that guardedness becomes a wall between you and the truth. So the next time someone assures you with words but withdraws with their body, take note. You don't need to accuse, you don't need to react, just observe. Because sometimes the clearest answer is not what they said, it's how their body moved when they said it. Sign 6. They laugh off serious topics as a way to escape them. Laughter is powerful. It can heal, disarm, and connect. But sometimes, laughter isn't about joy or ease. Sometimes it's a shield, a reflex, a carefully placed wall between the truth and the discomfort it carries. One of the most common ways people avoid accountability or vulnerability is by turning serious conversations into jokes. They laugh too quickly when something heavy is mentioned. They change the tone of the room before the weight of the topic can fully settle. They say things like, "Come on, don't be so serious," or "You think too much." And suddenly the conversation loses its edge. But that shift is not innocent. It's deliberate. It's a way of steering away from depth without appearing rude. It makes you feel like you're the one overreacting. It reframes your concern as unnecessary, your pain as exaggerated, your clarity as discomforting. The Stoics taught that we must confront reality as it is not as we wish it to be. To laugh in the face of suffering is not Stoic courage if the laughter is a cover. If the laughter avoids the truth, it becomes a form of dishonesty, not resilience. When someone consistently turns serious moments into humor, you're not just dealing with a funny personality, you're witnessing a pattern of avoidance, especially if this happens every time things start to get real. Maybe you try to talk about something that's been on your mind, and they instantly make a joke about it. They change the subject with a laugh. They brush it off with sarcasm. It seems lighthearted, but underneath it there's resistance. You're being denied a space to be heard, and they're avoiding a moment to be real. This kind of behavior is dangerous, not because it's loud, but because it's subtle. Over time, you begin to doubt your right to feel deeply. You start preparing your words carefully so they can't be turned into punchlines. Edit yourself to avoid being dismissed. Eventually, you stop sharing altogether. Because what's the point of trying to be honest with someone who refuses to meet you there? What makes this more complicated is that the humor can seem harmless, even charming. They're the life of the room, always joking, always light. But when the mask never comes off, when every serious note is softened with a laugh, it creates distance. Their humor becomes a barrier between you and who they really are. Of course, laughter has its place. The Stoics weren't against it, but they believed in appropriateness. There is a time to laugh, and a time to face what is hard. A person who always jokes when things get deep is not choosing lightness. They are choosing escape. And often that escape hides something they're not ready to admit. A lie, a pattern, a truth that threatens the image they've built. And if you press too far, they'll make you the problem. They'll say you're too intense or too emotional. And once again, the truth is buried under a smile. So next time you try to speak about something real and the response you get is laughter, not presence, not empathy, not curiosity, ask yourself this: why is my truth so uncomfortable for them? And more importantly, why do they need to laugh it away? Because sometimes the loudest joke in the room is really just fear wearing a smile. Sign 7. They become vague when asked for specifics. Honesty has a shape. It may not always be perfect or eloquent, but it carries weight. It has texture. It has detail. Real stories have roots. You can ask when, where, who, and the answers may not be polished, but they're grounded. They're real. But when someone is lying or hiding something, those details start to disappear, and in their place comes vagueness, generalities, and vague timelines that never quite align. You ask a direct question, and the response you get sounds like a fog. Words that sound fine at first, but leave you with more questions than answers. A lot of, "I think it was around then," or "We just hung out for a bit," or "You know how things go." It all sounds smooth until you realize nothing was actually said. The Stoics taught that the wise person speaks with clarity because clarity reflects internal order. A mind at peace has no need to be vague. Truth does not hide in generalities. It shows up in specifics, even if imperfect, even if incomplete. It tries to be seen. But someone who is being dishonest avoids those specifics on purpose, not because they forgot, but because saying too much risks exposure. They give you just enough to seem cooperative, but never enough for you to feel settled. You leave the conversation feeling more confused than before. And you start to question your own sense of clarity. Have you ever noticed how someone becomes less specific the closer you get to a sensitive topic? They might have explained everything else with vivid clarity, but when you ask about that one part, suddenly their memory gets fuzzy, their timeline stretches. Their tone becomes less confident, not because they don't remember, but because they remember too clearly, and saying it would cost them. This kind of vagueness isn't forgetfulness, it's strategy. It's a way of staying safe while appearing honest. It's a form of misdirection disguised as normal conversation, and it's incredibly effective because when someone speaks vaguely, we often fill in the blanks for them. We assume the best, we connect dots that weren't actually drawn, and we walk away with a version of the truth that they never had to commit to. Over time, this becomes exhausting. You feel like you're always trying to figure out what wasn't said instead of simply hearing what was. You start double-checking details, not because you're paranoid, but because you've been given nothing solid to stand on. A person who values honesty may forget details, but they won't fear them. They'll admit when they're unsure. They won't shift into abstraction when things get specific. They'll do their best to give you the truth as they know it, not as they wish it sounded. So next time you ask a question and the answer you get feels like a cloud, pay attention, not to the words, but to what they're avoiding. Is it a name, a time, a location, a decision? Is it the moment where truth would require more courage? Then they're willing to give. Because sometimes the most revealing thing about a lie is not what's included, it's what's carefully left out. Closing message. The real power is in seeing clearly. You've just walked through 7 subtle signs that someone may be lying to you. But maybe the most important truth in all of this isn't about spotting deception in others. It's about what you do once you see it. The Stoics didn't train themselves to detect lies so they could judge others more harshly. They did it so they could live more honestly, more freely, and more peacefully. Because when you stop being fooled by appearances, when you stop giving your trust away blindly, when you learn to see clearly, you take your power back quietly. You stop chasing answers that never come. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't really want to hear the truth. You stop confusing charm with character and closeness with integrity. And maybe most importantly, you begin to trust something that can't be manipulated. Your own inner clarity, that deep sense in your gut that says something here doesn't feel aligned. You stop silencing that voice. You start listening to it again. This doesn't mean you live with suspicion. It means you live with awareness. It means you carry compassion, but not naivety. Strength, but not bitterness. Distance when needed, but never disconnection from yourself. So as you move forward, ask not just who can I trust, but how can I trust myself more? How can I stay close to truth even when it's uncomfortable? How can I build a life so aligned that I never have to remember what I said because I always live what I mean? That is what Stoicism offers. Not coldness, not control, but quiet power. The kind that doesn't shout, but never wavers. The kind that sees clearly, speaks honestly, and walks away when peace costs too much. If this message spoke to something in you, if one of these signs helped you see more clearly, leave a comment below. Let me know which part hit hardest. And if you're walking this path of clarity with me, subscribe to Live Stoic now. This journey is just beginning.